Hello wonderful people, I'm Sam, welcoming you back to Hvalsø Prehistoric Park once more. Last time we built this cute little walkthrough habitat for the Psittacosaurus, but this time I think we're gonna get started on something quite a lot bigger. It's gonna be somewhere over here. This is gonna be a big project involving several habitats, and that also means it's gonna be spread out over several episodes. So you won't see the whole finished project in this episode. You'll only see the first of, I'm guessing, probably 3 parts, depending on how long it takes to build. But I have a really cool idea in mind, and I'm very excited to show you. So without further ado, let's get to building. Before I get into explaining the build too much, I want to talk about something about the overall park. I want to get into the narrative of what this park is a little bit. I see a lot of creators do this, sort of come up with a story for what their park is about, how it came to be, what's the narrative behind the way it's expanding. And I really like when that happens. I'm a storyteller myself at heart, and I've been wanting to do something with this park for a while that sort of played into that same sort of thing. And I've been racking my brain sort of in like how to come up with what sort of story this park has. I touched a little bit on it back in episode 2. Those of you who've been following me might remember. But there's still a lot of gaps in sort of the overall idea in my head. But basically, I think much like Knuthenborg Safari Park, which has been a big part of the inspiration for a lot of the habitats, I think the land where this park is, it used to be the estate of some sort of old money aristocrat who then, for more or less charitable reasons, decided to give the land to charity, or decided to build the zoo on the land through whatever sort of organization is doing this, sort of when this new technology that allows the rebreeding of extinct animals, it came to be. And so I think like a lot of the sort of old-timey styled buildings you'll find around the park, like the big entrance tower for example, are probably buildings that were on the estate and have been for hundreds of years perhaps. And then when the area was turned into a prehistoric park, a lot of all these newer constructions and stables and things were added, sometimes into the empty old building, and sometimes whole new constructions were made. Right? That's my main idea anyway. If you have any idea of what could be the narrative of this park, what could be the story, what could be the plot essentially, I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. Now, with that out of the way, let's get on to the build. Now, as you've probably already guessed from the little cutout, this is going to be an Ouranosaurus habitat. And in fact, as I mentioned earlier, it's the first part of a 3-part habitat for all the 3 African dinosaurs we currently have in the game. As you can see, I'm going with sort of a raised walkway build once again. And that's probably gonna be most of the habitats in one shape or form, because that is just the easiest way to make good viewing of big animals, I feel. But I am trying to mix it up so it's made in a very different way than the previous one I did with the raised sort of wooden walkway here. Instead, I'm raising the terrain where the path is. As you can see, I'm raising it a bit more here because after checking with the little Ourano cutout, I realized it wasn't tall enough. And I'm also lowering the terrain inside the habitat, as you can see. So in combination, you get this effect of the guest walking up on a ridge and looking down into like a valley where the animals are. See, the overall concept for this whole series of builds that I'm gonna be building over the next couple of weeks is that this is a journey along the Nile. The concept for this, not so much what the build looks like itself, but the core concept is inspired by one of my favorite habitats in one of my favorite zoos, which is in Odense Zoo. They have this big enclosure area that is called From Tip to Bottom or From Coast to Coast or something like that. I can't quite remember. It houses my favorite real life animal, which is the manatee. And what it is, it's sort of like a journey through South America where you start in like a jungle enclosure, sort of representing the northern end of the continent, and then you meander through and end up in a penguin habitat in what is supposed to represent sort of southern Argentina and the Falkland Islands, like the very southern tip of the continent, very close to Antarctica. And I just think that's such a cool idea, so I wanted to make something similar here, but with the animals available to me in the game. And I really felt like spotlighting the African animals in the game. So, and if you want to take a journey through Africa, what better sort of guideline can you give yourselves than following the Nile River? So we're starting here with the Ouranosaurus in a habitat that's styled after the environment you find around Lake Victoria in southern Uganda and northern Kenya, which is sort of approximately where the Nile begins. So you have this like lush savanna around the lake from which the river flows. Now, admittedly, I'm stretching things a little bit here because the Ouranosaurus is actually found in Niger and Cameroon, which is pretty far away from Uganda. But since it's one of the only 3 African animals we have in the game at the moment, I felt I could probably get away with it. Going into the build itself, you can see I'm making these sort of mud walls to border the path and the whole habitat itself. Now, if you wanna have something like this in your own park, I highly recommend checking out the workshop, because there's some mud walls up there from creators that are much better at this sort of thing than I am. But for my own build here, I wanted to, make my own. So that's what I'm doing. And I essentially have 2 mud wall pieces, so I can alternate between them, so it doesn't look as monotonous. I find that that's usually enough to break the texture up enough that it doesn't look completely copied and pasted. Yeah, and then some terrain painting, obviously some mud in the water as well, and then I switched to working a little more on the stable. As you can see, I've shamelessly stolen the fencing from my previous stables, and I'm just adjusting it to the new one here. I'm also experimenting with the painted bricks again, as you can see, which again I end up changing back to the regular brick. I just I really hate having to choose between the two, but despite the colors being much nicer when you can, customize them on the painted brick, the fact that the regular brick texture is so much more weathered just wins out every time, I'm afraid. Yeah. Generally, I'm trying to style this whole sort of staff facility building / stable to match up with the Psittacosaurus stable I built last time, so it looks like sort of it's part of the same building complex. I felt that would make sense. So very much same sort of old country house style building. But I think it turns out looking pretty nice. Yeah, I don't really think there's anything here that you haven't seen me do before, like making a simple but nice window and then copying around to the other window frames, that sort of thing. All pretty basic. In general, I will admit I'm not quite satisfied with this habitat. It's fine, it's okay. I don't think it's ugly per se, it's just I ran into a little bit of sort of builder's block this week, and by the time I got over that, I had very little time left to actually build the build and record it and edit it, and so I've sort of been skimping on detail that I otherwise would use more time on, like trim and detailing both on the building but also detailing in the habitat itself. Like eventually I will go back, I think, and really touch up these buildings and also the habitat itself, because it does. Again, I don't necessarily think it's an ugly build, it just doesn't live up to the standards I'm setting for myself. And also especially I feel like I've sort of I've regressed a little bit in my ambition when it comes to my builds. Like when I look back on my first couple of episodes and the things I did with the buildings there, compare that with this one and the one before that, these are pretty sort of simple buildings, just like built on the grid, big blocks, just with a bit of texture and trim. And I wanna challenge myself more. I just haven't had the time this time around. But yeah. So I might not just touch up. I may actually redo a whole lot of this. Of the building, at least. The habitat, the outside habitat, I'm fairly satisfied with. It just needs a bit of touch up on the terrain painting, and it also needs, like, I need to go back and do a little bit more intentional placement of the foliage, because as I usually do, I've been using like some brushes. Like I've customized some plant brushes and used them to cover most of the habitat. But then after that, usually I would go in and edit the plants around after I've brushed them across the habitat to make everything look nicer. And I have done that a little bit, but not nearly as much as I usually do, and not nearly as much as I would have liked, again because I was sort of pressed for time. So that's definitely something I'll have to go back and fix. But I'm not entirely sure when I'm gonna be doing that, because I also have to build the 2 next parts of this habitat going further up the Nile River. I'd also very much like to sort of segregate the stable like I've done with the other stables I've built, instead of just having one empty room like this. I do really like how the textures turn out though. I'm using the tropical sand this time around to cover the floor of the stable, and I'm also using that sort of spread out across the rest of the habitat. In general, I've really enjoyed working with the tropical both textures and foliage in this one. It looks amazingly lush. Obviously it does. That's kind of what the whole deal with tropical, right? But yeah, here you can see these are the bollards I made for the borders of the previous big hadrosaur habitat. So I figured they would make sense here as well. So they're also covering the borders. This one is also from the swamp habitat, the little water pipe there. And yeah, then you see me, once I know the points that sort of are important for the animals to get to, I can paint out their little sort of natural paths in between them, as you see me doing here, and just give me a little more, well, texture to the textures, both on land and in the water, as you can see. Again, I'm really coming to like the tropical sand. I struggled a lot with figuring out what type of grass I wanted. I ended up going with the scrubland grass. I wish we had something midway between the scrubland and the grassland one. But it's fine. I like how it turned out. Yeah, and then you can see no such thing as too many rock clusters. I'm getting just so much mileage out of those. Yeah. And then I'm making my little foliage palettes as I do. Try to figure out what sort of plants I want in the habitat. I actually do a few tries with that one. What you're gonna see is sort of the finished attempt. But yeah, as you can see here, reeds around the sides. And I'm also gonna put in a bunch of lotus and sort of water plants. And then you can see I'm using a lot of the tropical foliage around the borders of the habitat along the mudwalls, and then much more so sort of the grassland within the open areas of the habitat. Oh, yeah. I don't know how she ended up down there. I just had to stop and look at that because that was so funky. Yeah. Yeah, here you see me making signs. The whole area is going to be called the Ancient Nile from Spring to Sea. And then I also use some tropical plants, you'll see that in a bit, up on the mud walls as like green border along the path. Yeah, there you can see, like I'm putting in some greenery on top there. And that's basically the habitat done. As I said, a fairly simple one this time around, but let's put in some animals, shall we? Alright, time to get some Ouranosaurus. As with all the other animals in the game, they come with some great skins, but there's one that's just this one here, Spectrum. It's just so much more vibrant than the others, so this is definitely the one I'm going with. It also has some sexual dimorphism, as you can see here. It's not that I dislike the other skins, they look cool. It's just, yeah, I'm a sucker for bright colors. Oh, and the babies. Oh, can't wait to get them in the park. And here we are. Time to introduce these fellas to their new home. Alright. Aww. Some cute... Look at their sounds! Oh, well, listen to their sounds. That sound adorable. I love them. They look so goofy. Yep. Heading out to explore, as animals are wont to do. Alright. We'll come back to these guys in a second. Let me show you around. Alright. right past the Stegosaurus habitat and the entry up to the swamp, we come to the Ancient Nile from spring to sea. I'm going to add an English translation underneath later. Again, as I said, this habitat is slightly more unpolished than usual, but walking under this arch, we come up as the path raise and we get to our Ouranosaurus habitat. Let's see if we can spot the little buggers. I've really taken a liking to this trick here with putting a tree into the log stump enrichment feeder. Yeah, as I said, I really want to give this habitat some more polish. Oh, I can hear them. Yeah, they're over there. It's far away. Let's see if I can find another binocular. Oh, I think it's pretty far away. That's okay, we'll hop down and take a look at them in a bit. Hey, they're actually coming this way. Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, no, as I said, I really wanted to give this whole habitat a lot more polish down the line. It just, for now, I really wanted to have something to show you this week, so you're getting it as it is. I might have to move that little fern there, for example, because it kind of blocks the sight line a little bit. These cliffs, make sure to put up a picture. They're in the actual Lake Victoria. Well, there are some cliffs that look a bit like this in the actual Lake Victoria. I found a picture on Google and I thought it looked cool, so I kind of wanted to do a sort of a halfway recreation. The real picture, there's all birds on top, and very clearly they have been pooping on the cliffs, so they're sort of white on the top, and to sort of recreate that, I actually used the snowy rocks to get that effect, which I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, overall, sort of a fresh, lush habitat, I think. I can really hear them. Oh, I think, yeah, there's one right down there. Oh, cute. Yeah. This week's taco challenge says right on the cusp. And essentially, the translation goes, the Ouranosaurs have strong features resembling two distinct families or groups of dinosaurs. Can you guess which two? Continue along the edge here. As you can see, I've tried to strategically place the enrichment items in places where you can get a good view of the animals if they actually come to use them. And then here at the end, a little under construction sign for where we are going to continue the trail following the Nile north towards the coast. So the next part is going to be a lot more deserty area for the Carcharodontosaurus, and then we'll end up in the Nile River Delta going into the Mediterranean, where we're going to have the Spinosaurus, which I'm very excited about. Yeah. But this is it for now. Also, I would like to apologize. I'm sure you noticed the rattling through the voiceover during the speed build. I think my microphone was picking up my dangling earrings every time I turned my head. So sorry about that. I'll make sure to take them off in the future. Quick backstage tour. As you can see, again, this whole building, while styled in the same style as the building we built last time, is looking pretty bad. It's really lacking like the extra beams and that trim at the bottom that the other building has, and I also just want to make it a little more impressive to look at. But it does contain all the necessary facilities for us to really get started, like the large the large storage facility and produce station for all the different types of food that our new animals here in this section are gonna need. I also really like that there are these big windows looking into the greenhouse for the plant produce station. Yeah, going into the habitat itself. Let's see if we can find our Ouranosaurus so we can end up with some nice animal pictures. There's one. Hello, little guy. Hi. I can hear some of the others. Yeah, they're over here. Yeah. They're they're so tiny. They're disappearing in the brush. Yeah. With these lovely little critters, I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope you liked the episode. If you did, please, like the video, and if you want to see more of what I'm doing, please consider subscribing. Again, if you have any thoughts as to how I could improve the build, or any thoughts to what I might add to the story of this park, please comment down below. And otherwise, take care of yourselves, wonderful people. Until next time.